Okay, right. Welcome to the Scrutiny Performance Panel Development and Regen. Well, we haven't had a meeting since last February, so there's quite a lot of months actually gone by. We've also got a new member of the Scrutiny team, Emily Davis. I know she's having problems actually with some of her equipment, so you can't meet as such Emily at the present time. She's taken over development and regen, and she's taken over finance. She's actually come from outside of the local authority, so I think she's going to go through a big learning curve. I'm sure Liz will help her anyway. Right, okay, Liz, any apologies for absence?
Yes, we've received apologies from Councillor Philip Downing and Will Thomas.
Okay. Right, and everybody else is attending, but we'll have to go through the roll call. Can you take us through, please?
Yes, Peter Black.
I'm here.
Wendy Fitzgerald.
You're muted.
God. Yeah, sorry, I just muted myself. I'm here.
Steve Gallagher.
Yes, he's here.
David Halliwell. No. Terry Hennigan. Chris Holly.
Yeah.
Paxton Hood-Williams.
Present, Chairman.
Lindsay James.
Yes. Go back.
Mary Jones.
Present.
Peter Jones.
Present.
Sue Jones.
Yeah.
And Mike White.
Present.
Okay, and officers, Phil Holmes. Phil Holmes.
Sorry. Yeah.
Hugh Mowbray.
Yes, present.
Ben Smith.
Present, Liz.
Okay. And Councillor Rob Stewart. No. Okay.
Okay, perhaps that's it, yeah?
Yeah, that's it.
Liz, have you got me down?
Is that Linda James?
It's Linda James.
Yeah. Okay, I've got you. Thank you.
It is a bit of an unusual time for the meeting, but perhaps the others will join us shortly anyway. Right, any disclosure of personal and prejudicial interest? No. Right, as I said, the minutes are quite dated. To refer first of all to the 27th of January. These are for accuracy. That's pages 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And also the minutes for the 18th of February, our last meeting, again for accuracy, that's pages 13 and 14. There are also 2 letters that were actually sent in response to the meeting of the 27th of January, one to Councillor Stewart and one to Councillor Robert Francis Davis. I don't think we've had a reply to either. It's a pity Councillor Stewart's not here, but if he does join the meeting later, I will bring this back up with him.
Yeah, Councillor Stewart is here, so more than happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Stewart, I was just going through the minutes of the 27th of January and the 18th of February, and 2 letters that were actually sent in respect of those meetings, one to yourself and one to Councillor Robert Francis Davis. We don't seem to have had a reply. I'm sure some of the items have been superseded by now, but do you want those letters sent back out to you again?
No, that's okay, Chair. I followed that up this morning. The letters are ready to go, but of course, obviously, they were in the process of being sent when we went into lockdown. And as you say, we have covered a number of the topics, but for completeness, we'll make sure those responses come to you in the next couple of days.
Thank you. Okay. Right. Liz, any public questions?
No, we haven't received any.
Okay. Right, if we move on now to there's only one item on the agenda. I thought, as there's been such a long time lapse since the last meeting, we'll have an update really with regards to the dashboard report. Who's actually taken us through this?
Chairman, I think that's myself, Hugh.
Okay.
Shall I
Right.
try and share my screen?
Yes, please. I was going to say as well, with regards to the dashboard report and any questions, what we'll actually do is go through it one page at a time, if you present one page, and then we'll draw up questions with regards to that one page and go through the report that way. Okay?
Okay, not sure if anybody can see that.
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, if we go down
I
to the
see.
Yes, if
I can't see it.
first
Sorry.
page.
Sorry, Sue. What did you say? You can't see it?
I can't see it. It's because I'm not on my laptop. It's on the iPad. It's quite limited. I don't know why I can't access with a laptop.
Okay. Have you read it at all? Or, well, anyway, he will actually
Yes.
go through it, and if you've got any questions,
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Swansea Central Phase 1. The construction is progressing well. It's not stopped on site, so that's that is getting to look really good. The steelwork now is complete, so the basis of work now is moving inside as well in terms of Buckingham's work, which is moving forward. We are in discussions with the appointed hotel developer Cairns Group, and they've now made an application to Visit Wales for grant to support the delivery of a 4-star hotel, and that discussion is ongoing. There are a number of design work streams which are continuing as well. The church hall, which has now secured a planning consent since this has been written, the pod in the park, and some of the North Block aspects. So, as I said, the planning application of the church hall has been submitted and it's now been approved as well. And we've now selected a partner for the digital aspect of the tenders that went out, and that is for the day one connectivity for the arena, CCTV and Wi-Fi. So we will have the best broadband connections for the arena and the locality that we can, together with CCTV and Wi-Fi. So that's all coming into place as well. It's worth saying that, again, since this has been written, the bridge has started arriving in 8 sections on site on various lorries. I'd say that's coming in, so that has started to arrive, ready to be constructed on site and painted and then erected in due course. The Wellington Street works, that's all commenced and that's due for completion October, November. We're undertaking discussions with heads of service in relation to the maintenance responsibilities and the maintenance budgets, which will be set up in due course, as were outlined in the report which came to Cabinet and to Scrutiny late last year in that respect. So all the work on that to make sure everything is in place is continuing. We have a branding exercise which is underway, looking at putting a brand into place for this area, and there will be a launch of that in the next month as well. So that is also going to help with some of the lettings in terms of the commercial elements of the adjacencies to the arena. Obviously, the arena is still let to Ambassador Theatre Group, who are continuing to deal with the current climate they've got, which is quite difficult. They have had quite a substantial investment in the business from their equity owners to make sure it is it survives in that respect, and also they are actually selling quite a lot of tickets for next year and the year after, which again is funding their recovery. Obviously, not knowing when theatres are going to open is an issue. I think the timing for our arena is probably absolutely spot on, with the arena opening in 12 to 14 months in that respect, subject to the construction programme. So by that time, hopefully things will be in a better position and it can open. So that is a real positive. COVID-19 is impacting on the programme. Currently, it's 4 to 6 weeks behind, which is due to sort of social distancing and some supply chain issues in getting things like the steelwork on site, getting concrete on site. But having said that, in respect of where the general construction market has been and what we've been through since COVID's kicked in, this is a really positive position to be in, and Buckingham and the council have worked very close together to make sure that everything continues in that respect. So basically, the next steps are continuing to make progress, and making sure that the remaining aspects which need planning consents and need designs are actually put into place and will be delivered over the next period, leading up to practical completion next year.
Okay, thanks. Got a few names. It was Peter Black actually came up first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to actually one question now, because I think Hugh's answered the other question, which around the ATG ticket sales. I'm assuming that those ticket sales relate to the other venues as opposed to the current venue. I think you clarified what's written down there. In terms of Kearns, the hotel contract developer, I'm not familiar with them. Can you give us an idea of their pedigree, please? What other hotels do they own? Thank you.
Yes. Your first question, yes, apologies for the lack of clarity. It is ticket sales for other venues across the world, frankly. They're not selling Swansea as yet in that respect. In terms of Cairns, they are a major UK hotel developer and investor. They own about 40 significant hotels across the UK, including brands such as Marriott, Hilton, and they actually run about 20 of their own brands under the Cairns name as well. So all the due diligence has been undertaken on them, and they are a very robust company. They obviously have been suffering a bit like all others during the crisis. We've spoken to them. I spoke to them last week, and they are they've done quite well through this government initiative for meals Monday to Wednesday, and that's helped the business, and they are currently sort of starting to recover and in a good position given what's happened. So I think we're confident in them as a group. It's down to the discussion with Welsh Government in terms of getting the best quality hotel brand that we can for Swansea.
So if they own the Marriott, so effectively they're going to have two hotels within spitting distance to each other. That's the plan. No, not at all. It's not Marriott, not necessarily Marriott, but belonging to that group. Well, if it was that group, the discussion in terms of the brand is ongoing. They don't actually own the Marriott in Swansea is owned by a Saudi Arabian company. Okay, right. Lots of these hotels are based on sort of an owner and then a franchise to a brand company, and that's. I think the good news is that sort of with the new hotel coming next to the arena, which has got to be sort of a good quality, that's going to put pressure on the Marriott to refurbish that building because they need to be able to compete in the market. So it's going to create a little bit of competition at that sort of 4-star level, which is what Swansea needs because we haven't got that competition. And Marriott have been, I would suggest they have been not spending money on the property as they probably should have to keep it up to Marriott brand standard. Thank you.
Okay, the next one I got is Mary.
Thank you, Chair. Peter's actually got two of my questions. So the other one I have is, it says steelwork of the arena and north side residential core and MSCP is complete. Because it's been such a long time, can you tell me exactly when you're coming down Oismas Road and on your left you've got Tesco's and then the building, what is the building right on the corner? I'm assuming the car park is the next building in. It says here about residential core, but I thought it was meant to be offices, so I'm a little confused as to what that building is.
No, that's fine. Is it worth me trying to show you an image? I'm not sure if I can share.
If you could, it would be useful, but if not, maybe we can send it and Liz can send it on.
Can you see those images?
Not at the moment, no.
No,
Right.
can't see anything.
Okay, if you hang on a second, then let me stop sharing.
While he was doing that, Chair, if I could just add to try and help Councillor Jones. If you remember from the previous images, Mary, there was a lot of, it's like a brightly coloured building. We nicknamed it the Jelly Bean, and it's accommodation largely with some commercial units at the bottom. The office space you're referring to is would be adjacent to it as part of phase 2. But who should be able to find a nice little image now to remind you?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
That's the arena. The building you're talking about is behind this red hoarding there. If we go down to that image, that's the building I think you're talking about. That is the residential unit, which is basically 33 residential units, and the car park is this bit in the black behind it. You can see there the bridge will hit this sort of level, and then you've got sort of a commercial restaurant on the ground floor of the residential unit, and then you've got other units coming down the ramp towards the towards the city centre. That's the church hall. That's got the planning consent recently, and if I show you this image, these 3 buildings here, this one is the residential block with the car park behind it. That is the only one which is being built as part of phase 1. Mm-hmm. This is the office block, which potentially will be the hub moving forward, and this is another site basically which is unallocated at the present time. So that's going to be built now as part of phase 1. This is the start of phase 2 as the office block, which isn't that's not on site for for about 12 months, I guess, but that's going to come forward next is the current plan.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Am I the only one that's not able to see that image? If so, can you send it to Lee to send out?
I think we will ask them to be sent out. Can we do that, please? Yeah,
we can do that. And just for interest, that's an inside shot, which shows the fixed seating, which is going. This is the concrete work ready for the seats to go into it. So it's all sort of starting to come together. So it is quite.
Yeah, that's the arena. That's the arena you're showing us now.
That's the arena inside. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Shall I go back to the?
Yes, I've got Paxton, who actually, are you still want to ask a question, Paxton?
No, thank you, Chairman. I did actually take my hand back down again, didn't I?
Yeah, I know. I couldn't.
To be fair, to be fair, you had answered the question basically before I had a chance to ask it. So
okay. Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You know, the arena is really moving on, obviously within the current situation. Is it possible that perhaps a little site visit could be arranged for the panel to just have a bird's eye view of it? Is that a possibility here?
Yes.
And also in regards to the hotel application with Visit Wales, has that been successful?
We can certainly sort of look to arrange a site visit in due course if you can get me some dates when the group could look to do that. In terms of the Visit Wales application, that is an ongoing process at the moment. The Cairns have submitted their expression of interest, and Welsh Government of Visit Wales are currently reviewing that, and we're looking to have a meeting probably next week or the week after with the Welsh Government and the Cairns group.
Thank you, Hugh.
Okay, Wendy.
Yes, thanks. Yes. Well, thanks for the clarification on the ticket sales, because I think I was as confused as anyone else around this, because I was assuming we were talking about ticket sales for concerts in Swansea. Just one query, can you refresh my memory in particular on the number of commercial units we're talking about in this sort of area, you know, around the arena and the buildings opposite and so on, and what is the kind of commercial units, restaurants, shops, etc. Thanks.
Yep, that's fine. We have got a pod cafe restaurant in the parkland area, which is going to be constructed as part of this phase, and with the discussions with tenants are ongoing on that. There is a large potential restaurant in the base of the residential tower on the north side, sorry, and again there are ongoing discussions with that. There are a number of smaller kiosks which go down the ramp. There's about half a dozen of those. And the discussions with lettings are not ongoing with that at the moment, because I think we don't need to at the moment in terms of those. And then there's a further, you've got the cafe and the church hall development which I showed you in the St David's area. The church hall is obviously going to be part of the St David's Church, but adjacent to that is a building which we are looking to let at the moment, and there is ongoing discussions with some very good tenants actually. So the letting side, despite COVID and despite sort of what's going on in the food and beverage market, is currently going really well, and that's just a sort of a function really of having an arena which is going to have significant events and creating significant footfall, which will be a knock-on for the rest of the city centre hopefully as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I've got a question really. Going back to the hotel, it seems as if this group are the only people that have been or shown an interest actually in this. So, was there a tender process? And I can't quite understand if there was a tender process, and without the confirmation of grant monies from, Welsh government or whatever, how has this been agreed? How do we select this particular company?
This was done through a full tender process. We had a number of bidders, and the selection came down to the Cairns Group being the best under the procurement process to move forward. We had discussions with Visit Wales prior to that, but they would not give an indication of grant during a competition. They would only speak to the final party selected. So we couldn't actually finalise the grant position until we selected a party due to the Welsh Government rules, basically. So once a party was selected, they were happy to take that forward. The expression of interest has been submitted, and that is ongoing. So unfortunately, that is the process which we've had to follow. I think that we are comfortable with the Cairns Group. We had about 5 very good bids actually, which were competitive. So we're in a good position. It's just the affordability of the best hotel that we can get for Swansea, because a 4-star brand hotel at the moment is not deliverable without grant.
Yeah. Okay, so these people have tendered. I don't want to know the price, and you're not going to tell me anyway. So on the proviso that the Visit Wales actually come up with the remainder of the monies to actually build the hotel.
Yeah, yes. The obviously there's a budget they've got in place for the hotel. The company itself are putting in multi-millions into the build, and they are looking for a funding mechanism, mix of grant and loan, to top that up. Part of the issue is that the funding market generally at the moment won't fund hotels, so it's finding that gap to make sure it can work in the short term, and then get the any loan repaid. So that is the ongoing discussion we're having with Welsh Government.
Okay, and actually on the hotel as well, how big is this? How many floors are we talking about? And what about the impact on the the residents in the marina? Have they said anything, or have we shared any information with them?
We've fully shared all the information with the residents, and in fact the hotel was moved as part of the discussions with them. It was initially close up against the wall overlooking the marina, but it's now been moved right back to the virtually to the Oystermouth Road frontage to minimise any impact on the residents in that respect. So that's been, we've listened to them, and that's been sort of moved forward in cooperation with them as well. So that site was changed. The detailed design hasn't been completed yet, but it's likely to be circa 8 stories with about 150 bedrooms. Okay.
And the logistics of actually, building the hotel with the works that are actually going on in the arena now, does the arena need to be finished before that starts? Or
No, the arena doesn't need to be finished, but it needs to get to a certain point, because if you remember, you've got the arena and you've got the podium next door to it, and the hotel will abut that podium. So the arena works, the hotel site can't be handed over till mid of next year to the developer. So the arena works have got to be finished to a point, and then the hotel can, and we'll be putting in the podium level, as I said, and together with sort of service elements and linkages, so they can then join into that in due course. So the hotel won't start in earnest until sometime next year, hopefully.
Yeah. I'm sorry to ask another question as well about the the COVID impact and so on. With the supply chain, are we finding that it's getting worse?
I think that, I suppose the issue is that we've been dealing currently with some of the biggest packages of the contract, and there have been issues. There were issues with the steelwork because that was late starting on site. They have worked really well, and that's caught up, to be honest with you, largely. Concrete is another issue which we are seeing some issues with at the moment, and social distancing in terms of being able to work together and how that actually happens, and sort of forming concrete as well. So that has probably, well, that has caused sort of 4 to 6 weeks sort of delay, but as in the context of the wider construction construction regime across the UK, I think that's a very, very well managed process, to be honest with you. And between us and Buckingham, I think this project has moved forward significantly and very well during the difficult times. So I think it's, yes, there is an impact. We'll see what happens over the winter. That's another story. But up to now, it's reasonably minimal given the scale of the scheme as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Rob.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Just a couple of points to throw in on the hotel. Basically, obviously, as you know, under the current regulations, we're not able to build hotels ourselves, which is one of the reasons why we're having to go through the convoluted route that you described. But again, I just wanted to assure we'd had exploratory discussions with Visit Wales and Welsh Government to ensure that there was grant there. But obviously, as Hugh said, because of the rules, we couldn't absolutely say at the point at which we went out to the market what that grant would be, and it would obviously depend on what bids came back and what the scheme was. But we remain confident that there will be grant available from Welsh Government, and that will be available to the successful bidder to enable us to deliver a high quality hotel on that site, because that's what the aim is, to make sure it is a high quality offering.
Okay, thanks for that. Right, any other questions on this page? We may come back to this. Okay, I've got quite a few, but I'll let people speak. Right, can we go on to the second page then, please?
Yes, Swansea Central North, very simply. I showed you the office block in terms of the images slightly earlier. We have an ongoing discussion with the Government Property Agency, which is a UK-related agency, and Welsh Government, and they're currently sort of determining exactly how much space they need. We've completed an initial massing exercise with the architects, and we have a workshop coming up with Welsh Government and GPA to look at the specifications and the finishes. So from the council's perspective, my colleague Jeff Bacon is currently sort of looking at the occupational strategy and reviewing the needs and how that will fit together post-COVID and what we need moving forward, basically, for this building. So that's a piece of work which is ongoing. So we have a number of meetings with Welsh Government GPA programme to progress this, and once we've had the workshop, we can then hopefully start on the design aspects of it to get this moving forward to a project, which would then potentially come to Cabinet once we've got that in place with GPA and Welsh Government.
Okay, Peter?
Yeah, just a very quick question. I think we've got a report coming to Cabinet later this year on the Civic Centre. I'm just wondering, is that related to this particular development?
Yes, I think it is. This will be a report by Jeff Bacon largely, and that is looking at the occupational strategy. But obviously, in terms of moving out of the Civic Centre is a crucial aspect of this building. So they are definitely linked. That report is not likely to be the decision of this building until we get the agreement of the GPA and Welsh Government.
So is the moving out of the Civic Centre dependent on the timetable for this building?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Paxton, has somebody got the microphone on except for Paxton now, of course?
Just a simple question, Chairman, if I may. What exactly is a massing exercise, Hugh?
It's actually looking at how big a building in terms of width and height we can fit on the site. We have a planning consent for the whole of Swansea Central, which included this area, and there were a number of parameters set within that planning application for how high a building could be and how wide the building could be and what the key linkages are, etc. So this was an exercise by the architects to test whether the amount of space that GPA and Welsh Government and the council wanted would fit on the site, basically. So within the existing planning consent, and basically that exercise proved that that the site next to the ramp building could take the space which we wanted to try and get in there, which was a positive.
Thank you, Hugh. I just didn't understand the term massing exercise, I must admit.
Okay, if you can take your hand, all right. Chris Hawley.
Thank you, Chair. I think the question's been answered, to be perfectly honest. It's been answered by Hugh.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, could I just clarify in my mind as well? We're talking about a proposed office block here, which is not part of phase 1. It's going to be phase 2. We got the property government agency wanting, shall we say, part of it. So we're having jobs transferred from another area of Wales coming into Swansea. Where are these people actually coming from? And if it's phase 2, who's going to pay for this?
First of all, in terms of jobs, the Government Property Agency are UK government jobs, and there is a mixture of some things which are already in Wales and a number of quite large new entities which are either new or coming from Westminster as well. So, right. Which is part of sort of the creation of government hubs across the UK, and this is currently the funding for this. This is potentially the council looking at this as a building in its own entity, but the Shaping Swansea exercise launch, which you might have seen last week, reserves the right to for the developer we bring in for that to look at this if the council didn't want to do this as a scheme. So there are options open to us there, but initially the first the thinking at present is that this would be potentially delivered by the council, but we have other options.
Okay, so we're looking for a developer, but if needs be, we will pay for this ourselves.
This is the thinking, but obviously that would be funded largely by the rents which are paid by the Government Property Agency, a Welsh Government, etc., and anybody else who occupies the building. Right. Okay. Leader, do you want to come in? No.
Thank you, Chair. No, that was the point I was going to make. I mean, the aim here is not only just to get the jobs out of London and from the other parts of the UK into Swansea so that people are based here and we stimulate the economy. But of course, those government departments are blue chip and copper bottom rent options for us, and they will provide not only the repayment on the building, but obviously an income hopefully for the council for a long time.
Okay, with regards to that, are we costed, what we would have to charge those people? Because if we actually build an office block, I'm assuming it's going to be quite a substantial cost. And what sort of payback would it be feasible then at the end of the day, That's
an ongoing piece of work, if I'm being completely honest. We've done quite a lot of work with that. We've had lots of conversations with the Government Property Agency about an open book basis to make sure it works in that respect. So I think that is for a future discussion. But the aim is that the council, obviously, this needs to to wipe its nose as a project moving forward to ensure that it can be delivered without significant cost to the public purse.
Yeah. Okay, I got Paxton now, and then Ben Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. When you say wipe your nose, Hugh, what you're saying is that basically the income would cover the cost of the borrowing, is it?
That's the intention, if we can, and obviously the other occupier in there is the council, who obviously won't be paying a rent to ourselves, but we don't really want to pay a rent to anybody else either in terms of taking that forward. So it's looking at the building holistically in that respect, and hopefully the cost and value will then sort of be equal, basically.
Have we got any feel yet for the amount of borrowing requirement that we will require?
We haven't got to the detailed design stage yet, so not really, no.
Okay,
sort of any sort of feel whether it's 10 million, 50 million, or what?
I guess it's going to be between those figures. You know, we've got some very initial costing, which and at the end of the day, it's going to depend how much space the government property agency want as well. So it's, you know, there's a bit of a sliding scale here, which could be anything from sort of 20 to 40 million in essence. But it depends on the amount of space they want and the specification they want, which they'd have to pay for then as well.
Okay, it'd be interesting to see what those figures are eventually.
Yeah. Okay, right, I've got Ben Smith first of all, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, very briefly, just to echo what Hugh has said, it is very early days. Officers have kept me appraised of those options. I am open-minded to all eventualities, and it will ultimately come down to officer advice and then councillor decision as to what's acceptable in terms of the risk appetite versus the potential returns. As the leader has indicated, the sort of potential occupiers would be at the very decent end of the spectrum in terms of underpinning those rents. But equally, you will be aware of the officer advice I've given so far, and to some extent it is still a balancing act. At the moment, there has been no presumption on my part that I extend the overall long-term borrowing envelope beyond that I've already taken through council. But as Hugh and the leader have indicated, depending on the mix and the appetite, that's not to stop us considering extending that envelope further, but that'll be for a future day.
Okay, leader.
Yeah,
Rob?
thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Just to sort of for people, because it's easy to get, I find it myself easy to get focused on just one building or one part of the project. We've got to remember that this is part of an overall scheme where we decant out of the civic centre. Obviously, the civic centre itself will need investment were we to remain there. We would then look to occupy a new building within the city centre, because that will give the most economic advantage and economic boost to the city centre. You'll recall from phase one, the economic impact of doing the arena, etc., was circa 17 million or so per year. Our estimates already on phase two are significantly more than that, over 100 million, on the basis of the jobs created and what we would do there. So it's a wider story than just the investment cost. But obviously what we're trying to do, having now invested heavily in phase one as the catalyst, is to ensure that we make money and that we get returns for the taxpayer as part of phase two, and therefore the overall development itself. So that's still the aim. And as Ben and both Ben and Hugh have said, you know, we don't yet have all the detail, but the strategy still is sound. And the very good news is that both UK government and Welsh government and the market are supportive of the strategy that we're putting out, and we're getting a lot of interest and support.
Okay, thanks. Wendy?
Yes, just to refresh my memory, I mean, it seems all very positive that we're going to get some government department out into the sticks, so to say. What happened about inland revenue? Because didn't we have inland revenue offices in Swansea? And there was some discussion at some point about the land registry, the future of the land registry. I haven't seen anything about this of late, or maybe I just haven't noticed. Perhaps someone could just refresh our memories on the state of these particular government departments.
There have been discussions on the land registry. They're not currently included in the thinking for this first government hub, but I think that the UK government are looking at the potential for future phases of this when this is completed. So there could be a second phase with the land registry, etc., etc., which can add to that.
Could I jump in here? And
yeah.
It's not it's not that we don't want to answer Councillor Fitzgerald's question, but again, I think if the information like this is to be shared, I think it's probably best shared in private session, because the government departments, as you would understand, will want to speak to their staff first about any implications of any move. And given that we have an interest from a number of government departments who may not yet have had discussions with staff, etc., in various areas, I wouldn't want this to be the point at which they find out whether the interest is there or not. So it is a delicate matter, and I'm sure here we can share that information in a way that isn't public to assist with Councillor Fitzgerald.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. Right. There's no more questions actually on this page. As I said, you know, if anybody wants to perhaps refer back and so on, you know, they can. Right. If we move on to the third page, then please.
Yes, this is fairly simple at the moment. Two-way switch. This is the Kingsway infrastructure and public realm. The two-way switch has been completed. The green infrastructure is being finalised in terms of its construction, and which is all looking really good and is working well. And we're just in discussions with the contractor at the moment in terms of the programme for completion of the works. So simply, I think that's where we are, which is, and it's all looking very positive for me.
Okay, Peter Jones.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if we could have a little more detail about the green infrastructure work, what it's going to entail, how it will look, and approximately how long it's going to take. Thank you.
Okay. Well, the green infrastructure is mainly the sort of planting and the grassed areas.
Yeah.
There are areas for children's play with what's called corduroy, where there is a the grass is sort of in undulations to allow for children's play, and there is basically sort of further works to be completed in terms of the grassing and those elements, and we are trying to encourage developments that happen there to have green walls and to look forward. I think the positive issue is that a lot of people are responding well to what's happening on the Kingsway, whereas they probably wouldn't have looked at developments or living or working in those areas before. People improvements to the public realm, and it's making sure that we continue these improvements and through the city centre into the other schemes we're progressing.
I'm very excited by the prospect of the green wall development and should be looking forward to that with interest. The grassed areas, when I last looked, they seem to be suffering somewhat from public walking over, even vehicles being driven over. Have you any comment on that, please?
I think that the vehicle driving over it was in the early days when it had just been laid, and it did cause an issue. There's been further works and further maturity of that, and obviously there is all the works are currently under a maintenance regime with a contractor at the moment. So if anything does go wrong in this period, they've got to put it right. Okay,
thank you.
Okay, I did have the leader and Wendy and Mike White. Wendy, do you still want to speak?
Yes, sorry, I've had problems with my symbols not working. Yes, a couple of things. Can someone advise if the traffic in the Kingsway is back to pre-COVID levels? You know, do we know that yet? Because I've been through town a couple of times and it has seemed quite quiet. And initially, everything has been flowing as a consequence very well. The other thing is, I have noticed that there are quite a few trees looking as if they may not survive. Now, I assume there's something in place for their replacement should next year it become apparent that they are simply dead. Thanks.
Yeah. First of all, on the trees, they are covered by this maintenance regime. So if they do die, they will get replaced by the contractor. So that will be dealt with. I can't really answer the question in terms of the traffic levels. All I'm aware of is feedback that the new traffic system is working really well at the moment and making things flow. And now you haven't got to go through the Kingsway if you don't want to, because if you remember, some of the surveys we did initially was saying 40% of traffic on the Kingsway didn't need to be there. So it is distributing the traffic and amongst a number of roads, which seems to be working well. I would have to come back to you in terms of the how close we are to the pre-COVID position.
Okay, Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, seeing obviously the comments I've heard, how positive the Kingsway is since the new system has been put in place. Obviously very popular traders as well on Kingsway there. Is there any any snagging issues still outstanding in regards perhaps to footways or signage that we need to be following up on?
Oh, there's always snagging with projects. Yes, there are some issues which we are dealing with. Once before the contract comes to a final end, any snagging lists will be created and dealt with the contractor. So that's an ongoing process at the moment.
Okay. The leader, Rob.
Yeah, thank you. Just to reassure Councillor Jones, yes, the green wall is obviously welcomed on the front of the Dragon Hotel. We've also got other green infrastructure going in as well, and some of the areas which were previously ones where the grass was struggling. Of course, when the contractors returned to the site, obviously the marble and the granite has started. The granite has started to go in there now, and those have become raised beds. But as Hugh said, we're finding that that's establishing itself really well now. Hugh's dealt with the trees question. All I would say is that, of course, it'll link now to what we do with the Castle Square space in terms of the new revised Castle Square / Gardens proposal, which we hope to be able to share with everybody in a few weeks' time. And obviously the work that we're doing on Wine Street as well to bring further enhancements there. We will continue to bid for additional green infrastructure works as part of the making the city centre a much better and an enjoyable space. And of course, outside of what we're doing, you've got people like HASA who are working on the biophilic building, which I think has continued to make good progress in terms of the pre-works that are needed to be done. But again, we're looking forward to a very, very green city centre in a few months' time.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, if I can say, we met with Stuart Davis, I think it was January, some time ago anyway, and they were talking about a transport strategy, and the information would be fed to us. I don't know if anybody can update us on that. And I think, when undoubtedly, the road system is working better, but undoubtedly as well, there's a lot less cars actually on the road at the present time. Some issues we actually brought back, going back to the student accommodation again, with regards to not enough parking places in Swansea, and perhaps as a complete opposite actually to that, the number of councils are actually getting rid of cars in city centres. Are we possibly looking at that sort of strategy?
Do you want me to take that one, Hugh?
Yeah, fine.
The answer is no. We're not at the point at the moment where we are able to provide people with a carless city centre. That might come in generations to come, but certainly not in the next few years, because we need to create a fully reliable and integrated transport system to be able to give people alternative options. At the moment, as you know, for many people, the car is unfortunately their only option. But we'll continue to invest in both the green infrastructure, the electric charging infrastructure, so people can switch to greener vehicles. We're progressing our work on the South West Wales Metro with Transport for Wales and Welsh Government, and Ben George has been doing a huge amount of work for both the city and the region on that piece of work. And obviously we'll continue to encourage people to use other forms of transport where we can, but we're certainly not going for a carless city centre at the moment. You've got to remember that as well, though, the core parts of the city centre are primarily closed off to traffic anyway. But certainly we do need to give people the option to get through and across Swansea with their vehicles for the foreseeable future. And it's about striking that right balance.
Yeah, well, I think, the Welsh Government, I think, have actually come out today and said that about they want a third less people actually working in offices from now on, and to actually work from home. So I'm sure that's going to help the number of vehicles in city centres anyway. Right, can we go on to the next page? I think it's number 4, I think it was. Right.
Yeah, this is the digital aspect, digital village, and the strategy for the Kingsway. Basically, the tender for the office block we're looking at on the Oceana site has been issued through the South West Wales framework, and bids are likely to be back by mid-September. That date has slightly gone out because the bidders have asked for an extension of time. So those will come back. And we've actually included the Barclays building, which we bought some time ago as part of the process, to do some initial works on that to enable that to come forward as well as part of the wider scheme. So we're actually also in the process of looking at all the lettings in terms of interest from various parties, which we've been very well pleased with, actually. So that is going particularly well at the moment. And we are finalising discussions with a number of parties over the coming weeks, basically. So that will culminate basically in the tender return coming back, a report on the lettings, tying everything together in terms of cost and value, and a report to Cabinet potentially October, November, I guess, in terms of looking at this decision to proceed. If you remember, this is a City Deal project as well, so there is an element of City Deal funding which goes in to make this project work and to move forward. So we're looking at potentially then a start on site early next year, with a completion towards October 2022.
Okay, Chris Hawley.
Thank you very much, Chair. Hugh, I see on the key milestones, as you just said, there was a October Cabinet report on the decision whether to proceed. Will we have, well, if it's now November, so be it. What sort of figures are we looking for occupancy rates to actually build it? Because at one stage we were looking at well over 50% before we agreed that it was the viable option to build. Are we still looking at that, or have we dropped that down? Or, you know, considering that the Barclays building is included as well, are we still looking at that sort of figure, or are we not looking at any sort of figure?
Obviously, COVID has had an impact on tenants and when they sign up. That's an ongoing discussion, I think, and I don't think we're at that point where I can fully answer that question. To be quite blunt, I think that sort of we are very pleasantly surprised with the amount of interest we've got at the moment, but translating that into people signing is a question for the final report in that respect, because we're not quite at that position. Discussions are going well, and I think there'll be a decision at that point in terms of October, November, whenever it is, in terms of setting out clearly this is the cost through the tender process, and this is the position in terms of what we've got to in terms of the tenant negotiations, etc. And then there's a decision whether to proceed or not on that basis. And obviously we'll be getting advice on all of that from our letting agents and their thinking on the markets moving forward. Interestingly, the discussions we've had with tech businesses, which this is targeted at, they want to get back to the offices as soon as possible because they actually spin off one another and work together in a holistic sort of way in a building. So it's a different to a normal office block in that respect. But it's I haven't answered the question, but it's something which is an ongoing thread which we're working on, and we haven't got to the final answers on that yet, but we're not necessarily sticking to the 50% because things have changed so much. So that's an ongoing debate which we no doubt will have in future.
Okay, any other questions?
Can I come back on that?
Yes.
Obviously, I understand what you're saying about tech companies and they spin off one another, but the contract view is also now being discussed as well. But that actually will depend on the type of tech business that goes in anyway. What I'm more concerned about is the fact that we will then, so it will be, we will know October, November, have a final unconditional amount of lettings, or are we going to be speculative for some of it? So basically what I'm asking is, are we going to have a speculative bid for some office letting, or are we going to have a concrete bid for that office letting before we proceed? Because I think those are the issues that, when we had this discussion before, one of the issues that came up was that it was basically said, if we have over that X figure, we would build it. If we didn't have, we wouldn't. But from what you're saying now is you're going to have to wait to find a report, and then we'll have a look at it, and then there could be some speculative building there then.
I think that, I'm being quite honest, I think that's quite possible. You've got to remember, for this building, there are two types of occupiers. One of them is the larger space users and the anchored discussions, there's an ongoing discussion there. But it's also the operator of the buildings, who would probably take a number of floors. And the operator discussions, again, are going pretty well. And they would be taking the risk on some of those elements, I guess, and they are quite confident in that respect. The question is where do we get to by October in terms of lettings in place, or intention to get lettings in place, and I think that is a question. Some businesses at the moment aren't in a position to make decisions, to be honest with you, because of the COVID and trying to sort of make those businesses survive, I guess. So it's by the time we get to October, November, I think we'll have a much clearer position, and we will be able to give clear advice as to what the best way forward is at that point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Leader.
Yeah, just to add to what Hugh said, because I take a little bit more of an optimistic approach. Look, I mean, the strategy is the strategy. The city deal funds part of this. It's an intervention. It's about creating quality office space that we don't currently, or aren't currently able to offer in Swansea. And it's not about a temporary view of, whether all of the necessary tenants are there on one day. So, I remain of the opinion, and I will obviously listen to the officer's advice when it comes, but I remain of the opinion that we still have an unmet demand in the city. And even with COVID, we're going to find different working practices, but still a demand for offices that'll be used more differently. I think the more positive thing, as I think I said at council on Thursday, is that we haven't had to change our strategy for COVID, but what we have done is incorporate some of those updated elements, for instance, materials, different size walkways, some of the technology within the buildings, to allow them to be that flexible workspace that the market appears to be looking more and more for at the present time. So I'm still very confident that the demand will be there, and that what we build will see tenants coming in, and high quality tenants as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Mary Jones. Mary?
Sorry, couldn't get the mute off. We've recently come back from Plymouth in Devon, and there's an awful lot of office accommodation there that's new build and is empty. What kind of acceptable term would you expect us to fill these offices before they become like a white elephant for us? Because obviously, not as the EU leader or Hugh has said, we don't expect everybody to be in there on day one. What kind of occupancy would we need to keep it going? And are there any plans that if that isn't successful with the office block, what we would do with them?
Yeah, if I pick that one first, who wants to add a comment? I think, it's easy to go to or cite examples around the country where there may be an office block that's empty. But I think you've got to remember what we're doing is based on what Swansea's position is. And, it's similar for student accommodation as it is for office accommodation, in that we have unmet demand for those facilities in the city. And coming up to COVID, we were seeing offices and businesses not able to come into the city because they couldn't find accommodation that suited their needs. So what I would say is, inevitably, when you open a new building, you will have a graduated let-in strategy. Hugh has already indicated that there is a level that we will report in terms of initial interest. But, you know, if it takes a couple of years or longer than that for us to fill all of the buildings, then, you know, so be it in that respect. I'm quite comfortable that as long as we build a flexible accommodation to the required standard and we meet the unmet demand that's in Swansea, we will be fine.
Can I add to that? I think I fully support what the leader says. It's also worth saying that at the moment, Swansea has not got an office market. There is, if somebody substantial wants to move to Swansea today, there is no space for them to occupy. So this is really important. Graduate retention is another issue for us. We're not really retaining graduates. If you've got a good business, currently they've got to leave Swansea because there is nowhere for them to go to occupy. So all of those aspects need to be taken into account. And this is all about starting to create that market and to actually sort of have other potential offices built along the Kingsway and in Swansea as well. And then this leads back to the policy that we're looking to deliver, which is all about footfall and getting more people living and working in the city centre, which then helps support the rest of the city centre. So it is an important element. And as a City Deal project, there is a gap funding element to make this work in terms of finances, which is there already as well.
Okay, Paxton.
Same question as normal, I guess, Chairman. How much capital are we likely to require in terms of getting this in place, and to what extent will eventually the income from the letting meet the capital costs that we're paying back in capital financing charges?
Well, I'm not sure we can answer the question on the cost at the moment because we're in a competitive tender process. So the tenderers are actually bidding for this at the moment. So by the next meeting, we will report a clear position in terms of what the cost is. But again, in terms of the financial appraisal for this will be reported to Cabinet as part of the report which we've discussed, which will look at the cost, it'll look at the values together with the City Deal funding support, which will then hopefully demonstrate that the project works in that respect.
I think it's going to be a number of interesting figures coming forward in the not too distant future now then.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Chris Orley.
Thank you, Chair. Hugh, I don't want to disagree with you. I got too much respect for you, but I think I have to say this. There has been an office market in Swansea. You had the Sun Alliance Group, you had the General Accident buildings, you had the Prudential buildings, you had the other one, the old Western Morgan building. All of these buildings, and there were offices that were full. And I know one company that was in the Sun Alliance building who didn't want to leave there, but they were told to get out of there because they wanted to put student accommodation in there, and in the Prudential building and the General Accident building, they left because the rents were going up and they wanted to turn them into flats. So there was office accommodation. Yeah, the unfortunate thing is, and especially with the one that I know of in the Sun Alliance Group, there was parking there as well. So there was people that wanted to go there, and they were well occupied. So I think the problem that a lot of people had about, if say, bringing offices back in, is because those offices have been converted into other things. And I accept what the leader's saying with regards to intervention, because if we are going to build something and it's going to take a couple of years to fill it up, which I can understand, that we will have to intervene, and that's why I was asking about the occupancy levels to go ahead and build.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying, Chris, and I think that sort of Swansea hasn't got an office market now. There was basically, it did before the war and after the war to a degree, but the enterprise zone has sucked the heart out of the city centre in terms of most offices for the last, and retail, frankly, for the last 30 years went out to the enterprise zone, which decreased rents so much that it made sense to convert lots of these buildings to alternative uses because there was a higher value for alternative uses than offices. That is still the case in reality. And I think the issue that we've got is rents are low, and therefore you can't justify building offices. So the city deal money is, in a sense, gap funding. And what we're looking to do here is transform the market in the city centre and to trying to get rents to increase. Cardiff, for example, for 30 years was around £20 a square foot. It's only gone up in the last 18 months quite substantially, and that's only because of the Central Square development, which has actually created capacity and has driven the rental market in Cardiff, which has now increased substantially. So in a way, demand also follows the supply in terms of offices coming forward. So I think we really do need to try and make sure that the rents become more competitive, because other uses will take over without a sort of a clear policy in place to stop offices being developed into other uses. Then that will happen until they till the value of the different uses equates in that respect, and it makes sense to keep some of these offices, some of these premises in offices, which we need to get to that happy position really to for the city to move forward.
Yeah, can I come back on that? Because I understand that under the LDP, we have stopped any office building out in the city, outside of the city area, over a certain square footage, which I can understand, which perhaps we should have done many, many years ago to develop the city centre instead of what we did have under the Unitary Development Plan. But what I'm trying to say is that the Sun Alliance building, for example, only closed in the last 5 years. Yeah. So it you know, and that is, and I accept what you say, and I understand what you're saying, and I understand, but we are seeing banks closing all over the place. We're seeing insurance companies closing because of online business. So I do understand what you're coming from, and I understand the fact that we need to have intervention. But I'm just hoping that the sector we're picking on, or we are targeting, which is the high tech and the IT industries, will actually come back to the city centre.
Okay, thanks for that. Paxton, you want to come back, Paxton?
I'll just say one thing, and then I wasn't going to, but I will do. But obviously, presumably, the fact that we are building new office space means this will be suited for current requirements and requirements going future, which previous office spaces wouldn't be at this point in time, I guess. And that will be hopefully the mechanism which creates a demand for it. I assume that's correct, is it, Hugh?
I think you're spot on. This will probably be one of the most COVID-friendly buildings in the UK. It's got outside space, it's got balconies which you can hold meetings on. That is going to become a common theme in new offices which are built. The leader mentioned materials. All materials are antiviral in that respect. The staircases are wide enough to have social distancing to go up and down. So it will create its own demand in that respect, because it is one of the few buildings in the UK which will be as COVID proof as possible. So all that thinking has been taken into account and is in the final designs to be delivered in essence. So that should help with demand as well.
How long are you anticipating that COVID is going to be around then, Hugh?
Well, no one knows, what COVID-20 is, or COVID-21, I guess, in due course. But I think it's, part of that is part of the fire strategy as well. So this is a sort of multi-pronged approach to the design of the building, really.
And we're looking at another possible pandemic in the future as well, aren't we?
Hopefully not. Okay. We're
Hopefully ready. Not, yeah.
If there's no more questions, I just got one on the risk, really. Perhaps it's just clarification, and perhaps, Ben Smith can help you. It's actually on about budget and programme implications arising from COVID impact are yet unknown. Now, this is a city deal scheme, so the COVID implications of other costs, shall we say, with regards to council tax, payment or whatever, is not affecting this at all. This scheme is totally standalone with regards to, I think we borrowed 90 million now, and it's going to go up to 135 million for the city deal schemes. Is that correct? Am I reading that COVID implications mean that COVID implications shall we say, with the arena, any additional costs and so on. It doesn't bring any costs that are incurred by the council on other matters.
Before Ben comes in, to be fair, I think that is looking at the unknown. What is going to happen in terms of programme? What happens over the winter? We don't really know. Currently, the programmes are clear, and we will move forward. Anything in based on the programmes we've got. COVID could have an implication on that. It could have implications on budget. COVID, for example, for the arena is all taken into account in the contract. So there isn't a significant additional cost, if any, frankly, for COVID as part of the arena. The tender for 71-72 is out there at the moment, and bidders will reflect COVID and any implications of subcontractors as part of that in the tender bid. We don't know what that is because they haven't come back in yet. So that's another future issue.
So we are within budget for the city deal projects then?
From my perspective, yes, Ben can sort of separately on the council budgets, but in terms of the project budget at the moment, yes, but obviously the project budget for 71-72 hasn't been allocated yet because it hasn't been to cabinet, and that's sort of the October-November date.
Yeah. Okay. Ben, do you want to say anything?
Yes, please, Chair. Couple of brief bits, not to over elaborate on the point or labour the points, but Hugh is quite right. The budget for the city deal stuff remains the budget for the city deal stuff, so it remains within budget in terms of that overall totality, because Cabinet has not received anything further back to date. I think the reference there is both to the scheme specifics, but also the risks that the reality is, to misquote the often quoted phrase, that we're back to known unknowns and unknown knowns and those sorts of things. It is undoubtedly the case that, council set budgets and medium-term financial plans on the advice I gave at the time, pre-COVID. There are a whole raft of uncertainties to come with the spending review, what pans out with COVID and other matters. But at this point in time, taking that macro position, I've already indicated in some of the decisions that Cabinet has already had to take as emergency items, but hasn't yet been in the position to receive the first quarter monitoring report, that I do expect us as a council to be overspent for the year, but overspent to a fashion that is reasonable and acceptable and affordable in the circumstances. And there will be a formal report to Cabinet in October on that. The reason we've had to hold it back a little bit to try and get a bit greater certainty on the overall position. But I remind all councillors at the beginning, when we set the budget in March and the medium-term financial plan for both this year and last year, no one expected me to be flexing the budget by over £100 million in year. So I think you take it in the stead with which it's intended. There is at this point no reason to assume otherwise. But it's right that Hugh has it on the dashboard that there are those known unknowns.
Okay, thanks for that. Right, if we go on to the next page then, please.
This is the strategic sites shaping Swansea exercise, which culminated in the launch through the Estates Gazette last week. Basically, very positive launch. So far, we've had about 1,200 views of that event, and we've also had some very positive response from the Estates Gazette to say this launch has been as good as anything they've had in terms of major cities across the UK as well. And they've actually been sort of inundated with requests from cities to look at similar things, because this is the first time they've done a major launch for a whole city initiative. So that's gone particularly well. All the procurement documents are obviously in place, and the procurement has now gone live on the Sell to Wales website, and then sort of bids, the initial stage bids will come in 21st of October, I think it is, which we will then shortlist to then take forward into the detailed discussions with the various parties. So I think the launch has gone really well. We've got a lot of interest at the moment, and that's hopefully now going to turn into formal bids towards the end of next month, and then we can report back to you in due course.
Okay, thanks. Peter Jones.
Well, thank you, Chair. I lost the screen for a moment there, but it's come back. I wanted to ask about the first bullet point concerning flood consequences assessments. I'd like to know just quite what sort of flood are we concerned about here? Are we talking about rainfall, excess rainfall, increase in intense, frequent rainfall events? Are we even thinking further ahead to possible sea level rise and that kind of issue? I just want to know, just what are we talking about here, please?
Okay. Well, this is complying with the Natural Resources Wales sort of policies and their thinking in terms of what's going forward. Swansea as a city has got flooding issues, which we reported into cabinet previously. Basically, there is sort of a short term and a longer term thinking going on here. And in terms of Natural Resources Wales thinking, there's sort of a 5-year horizon to do some of these works. So it is important to look at the long term. But in terms of specifics, things like the Sailbridge site, for example, we need to do some significant work on that. That's one of the strategic sites. And it's basically the main flooding is from the river as opposed to the sea, which is what the modelling actually shows. And that element by the Sailbridge, by Sainsbury's, is the low point, which will become inundated if these models prove right and there is a major flood in those locations. So in order to move things forward like the Sailbridge, there needs to be a significant piece of work on that to show how the Sailbridge can work, but also protect the adjoining areas. There is a piece of work which, if you're aware of the underpass, which is next to the Civic Centre, that needs to be largely blocked to actually create a wave barrier as well, which would potentially affect the sandfields, etc. So there are elements there which need to be done, but these are all within the longer plan. But when you put more planning consents in as we go forward with a strategic partner, one of the early things we need to do is to look at things like flood consequences, like contamination. All of these issues, which are standard practice for any development site, need to be considered and dealt with on a site-by-site basis as we move forward. And what we're saying here, I guess, is to try and de-risk some of this to move things forward. We would like to do some of these elements in conjunction with the partner being appointed, so as we can actually sort of twin track the appointment of the partner with some of these works, which means we can move forward with the schemes quicker once they're appointed as well. So that's why it's flagged up here, basically.
Well, that's encouraging, because clearly, I can recall that in terms of Welsh Government or NRW designation of floodplains, that an area in the area that we're considering had been designated as a floodplain, whether from the river or from the sea. So we clearly need this kind of long-term thinking. And then, of course, there's also the issue of increasingly intense and frequent rainfall. And I wonder whether we feel that in terms of the city centre, we're going to be able to cope with that in particular.
I think the key to this, as the modelling shows, is the Sailbridge site area, and that's why it's really important to get that right, because that does protect the city centre and the river along the Sainsbury's element there. So that is part of the modelling that would have to be done early on as part of this process. So basically the Sailbridge site relies on that modelling and a solution coming forward to enable it to be developed. So I think that will provide the protection for the city centre for the long term as well, is what the advice we're getting at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mary Jones.
Thank you. One comment, one question. The comment is, which I think I say every meeting, on this page particularly, there's an awful lot of acronyms. And if the public are trying to listen in or trying to read these reports, I don't know what some of them are, so I'm sure they don't. And there's even one on the following page, to save me asking it again, with Welsh Government TRI funding. But there's a number on this page, and really we should have a glossary. My question really is the second bullet point, and it's about with regard to how to proceed with updating parking standards. Can you explain a little bit more what we are trying to do with updating parking standards?
Yes, by all means. This was referred to earlier in terms of the highway strategy, which is being looked at the moment. With colleagues in highways, we're looking at what is the appropriate parking mechanisms for the city centre? How does that link to public transport as well, which is really important? So in a way, it's looking at a holistic travel plan for the city centre to make sure the city centre can function, the offices we're building and the rest of the city centre can operate. So currently, the current parking standards and the parking policy have been there for quite some time. They probably are not entirely fit for purpose anymore. So we're looking to review that to make sure they are fit for purpose, and it allows developments to come forward in conjunction with a significant travel plan, looking at sort of car parking, looking at park and ride, looking at bus services, looking at train services and how they're all connected together. And as the leader said earlier, the sort of the potential for the metro actually to join into all that as well. So it's actually looking at Swansea and making sure it's fit for purpose for the future, basically.
Okay, thanks for that. Wendy?
Yes, thanks. It suddenly occurred to me as you were talking about the situation re-travel. You see, we are still in the COVID scenario, aren't we? So presumably travelling into the city centre at this time and into the foreseeable future is going to be mostly by car, given the limited passenger numbers that can go on, buses. Are we taking this into account at all in helping people to park in the city centre? I just think about the fact that, North Swansea, we've got Park Trostre, and I've brought this up before. I mean, how convenient is it to go to Park Trostre? It's free parking. Whereas, to travel into the city centre, you do have to pay a fairly significant sum. And you would want to probably use your car if that is the option that you have, in preference to travelling on public transport at this particular time.
I don't disagree with you entirely there. I think there will be a period where the car is king in that respect, and it needs to people will want to travel. Hopefully, as things move forward, that will change. We're obviously building 2 new major multi-storey car parks as part of the arena project, and in essence, that is all being taken into account in this parking strategy, which has been looked at, and the different modes of travel, but the metro and the public transport has got to play part of that process in the longer term to make sure the city continues to operate and we can build these the various developments which are ongoing, and making sure that they can operate. People can get home either from offices or from a concert or whatever it is. So there has got to be a proper parking strategy that goes with that. But I think we all have got to accept that in the short term, people will prefer to use their own car because of the current risks. But hopefully that will change over time once we get a vaccine in place.
Okay, leader.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Hugh has said and really just remind, because it's easy to build this perception that, coming to Swansea City Centre is expensive to park. Actually, we've got promotions running with bid at the moment, park for 3 hours for £1. And it'll cost you more than £1 in fuel to get over to Trostre, so it is competitive. I do take what Councillor Fitzgerald said in terms of the restrictions on public transport at the present time, but our strategies are ones that hopefully are the right ones for the long term. So we do and are continuing to help in the short term in terms of parking deals and making it attractive for people to bring their vehicle into the city centre if they need to. But longer term, greater capacity for parking, but also those alternatives I mentioned earlier in terms of the metro system and alternatives for people to bring green vehicles into the city centre as well and be able to charge them.
Okay. But there seems to be sorry, Paxton, you carry on.
Just a quick question, probably showing my ignorance again, Chairman. We're obviously building something, or something is being built by the traffic lights in St Thomas, just to the east side of the river there. Are those car parks or what?
No. Flats.
On the SA1 site, or?
Yes, basically.
Student accommodation, isn't it?
The SA on the SA1 that's a student scheme.
Okay. Sorry, I did show my ignorance again then.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You know, you actually mentioned in a few of the points here that you're drawing up draft procurement documents, or I think you might have said that they've been drawn up and so on. It's quite a huge number of schemes you're actually talking about here. Some quite small and some perhaps quite large.
Yeah, absolutely. When we did the original PIN notice for this, the response to the PIN notice was, first of all, this needs to be an opportunity of scale. It needs to be over a longer period of up to 20 years, and it needs to include a mixture of short, medium and long-term deliverables. So that's what we've tried to do in terms of the 7 sites which are in there. Some of them are short-term, some of them are medium-term, some of them are longer-term. But the procurement documents actually also say it doesn't restrict the developer or the council to those 7 sites. We could introduce more sites to that partnership as we deem fit to do so in due course. And in fact, this procurement is more about selecting the right partner to work with us in the longer term and understanding the way they work and how we would work as a partnership than it is the sites, if I'm honest. You know, in terms of we're using those sites, and 3 of those sites through the procurement process they will be asked to work some detail on. But that detail is not necessarily going to be the final scheme, but it's looking at how they approach these things, how they would work with the council, and what their sort of process is really to make sure we are appointing the right partner, because this is for a long time, and we want to make sure it's the right partner that we appoint to deliver with us in the future.
Yeah, well, hopefully one partner, isn't it? You know, it could end up as more than one partner.
Well, it's the intention, and the procurement documents are on the basis of a single partner or a consortium of partners. So we wouldn't look. We're not looking for different developers for individual sites. Right. It's one partner or one consortium of partners, which may be a number of companies which come together to make a bid.
Well, it seems to be a lot of interested parties. You said there's over 1,000.
Well, we've had there are 1,200 views of the Estates Gazette launch, which went out last Friday, I think it was, on the 9th. So that is I'm really pleased with that. Actually, that's a really good start to the process. Yeah. It's just got to sort of transfer itself now into bids, and I hope we don't get 1,200, because we'll be here for the next 10 years to assess those.
I was going to say, yeah. Okay, can we move on to the next page then, please?
Yeah. Last page, this is sort of a catch-up. Castle Square, I think the leader has covered this in a way that sort of we are hoping to have the detailed scheme designs before long, which we can then analyse and share in terms of moving that forward. Yeah. Velindre, it's had a bit of a hiatus because of COVID. The marketing continues in that respect, but we haven't got any firm leads on that at the moment. Havant Copperworks and the Powerhouse, that has the works for Penderyn are actually started on site, so that's moving forward. That's really positive. So that is happening. Mariner Street, if people have driven past that is now topped out. The final height has been reached. So that is also sort of moving well, and that'll go internally now in terms of fitting that building out. So there's a positive story there as well. Swansea Vale, there's quite a lot of work being done on ecology and how that is dealt with as part of the scheme and a wildlife management plan. So that's all sort of being taken forward in order to see how we can market some of the sites which can come forward next there. Skyline, that's a very positive story at the moment. I had a conversation with Skyline and Visit Wales last week. So they are keen to look at moving the scheme forward with the support of Visit Wales. They've got a company called Baldwin's on board, which are finalising their bids to Welsh Government to move that forward. So and they're now coming out of recession in New Zealand as such, so they are looking at how their international programme moves forward, and Swansea's obviously a key project as part of that. So that's again something which is we're looking forward to further discussions with them over the coming weeks and months. And Wine Street, again, the designs for that is being worked on in terms of the detail. The gold scheme, as was presented, is being looked at to create a real step change in Wine Street, to create a new street there, which will be very attractive, and it'll have sort of all the hallmarks of sort of green space, a single level plateau rather than curbs, and greening and spaces for entertainment and lighting. So that is moving forward, with the first elements on site will be either end of Wine Street, and then we're hoping to do that before the Christmas period, stop for Christmas and then carry on afterwards. So again, that is something which is going forward well as well, and it's probably the right time to be doing that as well, in terms of supporting the businesses in Wine Street and generally the city centre.
Okay, thanks. Peter Black.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. On the Wine Street project, as you know, Hugh, there are a number of accommodations on Wine Street, specifically the post office development with coastal housing. And there are a number of tenants there who are physically disabled and some who are partially sighted. I'm just wondering what consultations have been made with those particular residents regarding ensuring that this new development is completely disabled compatible and meets the needs of those people who actually live on the street.
Yeah, as you're probably aware, we've done quite a lot of consultation on the Kingsway scheme, and the same process will happen on Wine Street. There's been a number of consultations already with businesses and with occupiers. There was one about 2 weeks ago, and the scheme has been designed again in the same way. So as the sort of tactile paving and all of the sort of the usual DDA thinking is actually being put into the scheme. So there will be further consultation. We will have consultation with the disability groups as well as we move forward. So I think that sort of I would hope that there will be no problem with that. I think we've had a good relationship with the disability groups on the arena and on Kingsway as that's moved forward. So we just look to continue that positive partnership, really, and making sure they're aware of what's going on, and making sure they're comfortable with the process moving forward.
Is coastal housing as the landlord involved in those consultations?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, the Harvard Copper Works site, obviously very keen on this. So this is obviously in my patch of the woods. Obviously, the building been derelict since 1980, and very, very glad to see the Penderyn project going there. Have you, now the site to start, have you got any idea who as to when this distillery could be completed, and as to how many jobs will be created on this site with this distillery?
I'd have to come back to you on the number of jobs. I'm not entirely sure on that. The council's contract with the contractor is just over 12 months. So in about a year's time, the building will be finished for handover to Penderyn for their fit out, because they've got quite a big fit out, because they've got to put in 2 major stills for distillation and the visitor centre aspect. So that is, I think that's about 6 months. So it's probably about 18 months before it's going to be open in earnest in that respect. But works are moving forward fast, and I think it's going to be very positive. The point being that in terms of Penderyn and Skyline become real catalysts for creating a major destination, leisure destination, a heritage destination on Harvard, which then sort of gives major opportunities to move that whole area forward and create more jobs and more sort of wealth and growth for the area, which I think is really positive.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that information.
Okay, Peter Jones.
Thank you, Chair. My comments are with reference to the Swansea Vale project, as you might expect. I've been looking into the background a little, not a lot, but a little, concerning the ecology on the site and the affected ecology on the site. And I would like further information, please, in terms of, in particular, the mitigation measures. I mean, my understanding is that there are important wetland species on this site, presumably both animal and plant. And I'm wondering just quite what is involved in terms of, quote, developing a wildlife management plan for the area, and more information, please, in terms of the kind of development that is envisaged on the site. Thank you.
Yep, fine. I'll, if it's all right, I'll put you in touch with one of my team who's been dealing with that, and you can have a direct discussion with them. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that would be fine. Thank you.
Okay, Wendy.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Velindre site, I have to say it is disappointing that we still have only one business operating from this site, given the, the significant investment that has been pumped into it. I think we're talking of well over 30 million, aren't we, over a number of years. What I just wanted some clarification on, it is a brownfield site. You refer here to draft ecology reports being reviewed to inform habitat mitigation and a maintenance plan. What exactly are we talking about in this connection, given it's a brownfield site?
It's a brownfield site, but there are various ponds and streams around there which have habitat. And basically those need to be considered in any development and stuff going forward. So it's making sure there's a clear plan which makes sure those habitats are maintained and aren't affected by any development coming forward. So it's on the fringes. It's not within the sites which are being prepared at the moment in terms of what's going to be let. This is around that area, which is fairly green and fairly sort of natural habitat in that respect. So it's making sure those elements are dealt with properly and appropriately, really.
Okay, Paxton.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a small point, really, in the sense that obviously a number of these sites like Castle Square, Harvard, Wine Street are quite important areas from a historical point of view in Swansea. We're obviously looking for them to be destinations in many ways, one shape or another. So to improve a visitor experience, can we ensure that we've got plenty of interpretation boards around so people can be aware easily the history of those areas as they walk through those areas? Thank you.
Yeah, happy to take that on board. We're doing that in the arena at the moment, so it makes sense to do that in these schemes as well. Yeah.
Okay, if I can just, it's only on the budget side, really. I can see most of all of them are actually green, but that doesn't mean that the schemes are fully funded. In fact, we've, shall we say, with regards to the distillery, I think we put in 1.7 million, and I think the rest is, grant money. So I can understand the budget there. But Castle Square has not been. The money's not come up for any scheme as yet.
No, I suppose that relates to our current sort of work programme, and we're doing the feasibility and the designs, which are fully funded, and that then leads to a report to Cabinet to decide whether to proceed. So I suppose that's then on to the next phase. So yeah. I take your point, but it's
with regards to fully funded with Cabinet, it could end up that we are actually funding it.
That's a decision for Cabinet, but yes, that is a possibility.
Yeah, I must admit, I'd like a little bit more clarification on what these greens mean for. I know it's work for you and so on, but if I could have clarification, or the committee can have clarification on with regards to who's going to fund this or possibly fund this to bring the schemes to completion, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, we can do that, but I think it's got to be done at the right time, because at the moment this is only in feasibility stage, so it's looking at what the design is, what the cost of that is, which we don't know yet, and then there's a further decision to be made. So it's looking at sort of chunking these projects up into different milestones, really, and looking in that way.
Yeah. Looking at the graph, it looks at green here. To me, it means that everything's hunky-dory, and it's not. It's not been finalised then. So
no, agree.
Okay, Ben Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to reiterate, that's a point well made, but equally Hugh has made clear it's green assessed against the parameters to which he is currently working. Given that there is money for the development phase, the feasibility phase, it's green, but you're absolutely right, Chair, there isn't yet money for building it. That is a decision for Cabinet and Council in due course as we work through FPR 7 and budget process.
Okay, thanks for that. Chris Ollie.
Thank you very much, Chair. On Castle Square, I was under the impression that we were employing a development manager specifically to look at Castle Square. I seem to remember about 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago, we had that discussion, and I was wondering what happened with that. On Velindre, taking the last point on that paragraph, a marketing meeting arranged with agents to review inquiries and marketing strategy in light of COVID. Can you explain that, Hugh? Because given the length of time that this has been available, and given the time that the Welsh Government, who made this a major strategic site some years ago, I've got to say that I feel that whatever marketing has been done is incredibly poor. And because, I can remember talking to you about this and others many, many years ago about why we're in the position we're in and why we had to get money from the Welsh Government to actually prepare the site back in the early 2000s, 2005, 2006. Where I was under the impression the site was ready to be used. Now, can you confirm that what marketing is going on now is marketing the site for immediate use?
Yeah, taking them in order, in terms of Castle Square, we do have a development manager and a professional team in place, but a development manager is not a developer. It is just a consultant to us who would manage the process on our behalf. So that is still there. Company called Spider Management. So they are still in place and will be reporting shortly in terms of their recommendations in terms of design, etc. In terms of Velindre, we've got an external company who's employed to undertake the marketing, company called Bruton Knowles. And we are reviewing now how that's being done and what we need to do to take it forward. The sites are ready for occupation. When we took this over, you couldn't have occupied the sites because the services and the detail was not there. If you remember, we had a grant from Welsh Government to do the works. The site has now been sort of serviced. The roads are in, and the sites are sort of allocated and split up in line with the planning consent. So if a party is ready to come in like DPP, they can come in and occupy one of those sites fairly quickly and get on with the building of it. So the sites are fine. There's not an issue with those. I guess the marketing strategy, we do need to review and have a discussion with the agents to see what the best way forward is, and is it them or is it somebody else?
Can I come back on that, Hugh?
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to disagree with you, but I'm going to actually say this. What I can't understand is that the Welsh Government came forward and said this is a fantastic site on the M4, own rail link, etc. And yet there has been major developments. You have got a factory, the Aston Martin factory was built on the former St Athens airfield, which hasn't got exactly the best connections. It's probably worse than Roos Airport. You had Grenadier that was going to be built alongside the factory, the Ford factory in Bridgend. And on top of all that, now we hear that the St Athens site is being earmarked for a battery manufacturer, which is going to employ nearly 1,000 people, or potentially 1,000 people. I think initially it's about 400 or 500. You then have to ask yourself, forget about the city deal for a minute. It's these type of jobs that we desperately need in the city and in Southwest Wales. And what I'm going to ask you and ask the leader and to ask the Welsh Government, why were these organisations, why were they steered towards St. Athan? Why were they tiered? I can understand the one, the Grenadier one, going to near a car factory because of the skills that are in there already. So I can understand that, but I do not understand the others. And I feel that as we have been left behind a little bit by the Welsh Government in this steering exercise, and you know very well what I mean by steering. So I would like to ask you and the leader and everybody else involved to find out why we haven't had these opportunities to bid, or have we had the opportunities to bid for them and we failed? But I think it's important that the public and we as members know what's going on.
Can I come in, Chair? Just on that specific point, if that's okay.
Yeah.
The specific St. Athan project that Councillor Holly mentioned, the one to do with the battery development factory. I think it's just a matter of scale, to be honest with you, Councillor Holly. It's the requirements that they have far outweigh the land availability that we have at Velindre. We did put forward the Velindre site, but it just is not big enough to accommodate that requirement by the private sector. I would also say as well, whenever we have an inquiry into Wales, Velindre is always part of that discussion, alongside the portfolio of sites that we have across the Welsh patch. And Hugh and I make sure that is the case. We meet with Welsh Government as part of the joint venture on a regular basis, and we make the point that Velindre is ready for development. They know that they're a joint venture partner with us, so it's not in anyone's interest to not put Velindre forward, but it has to be the right development in terms of scale to accommodate on the site. And of course, it has fantastic infrastructure, we know that, but sometimes when the scheme the footprint requirements are too big, they have to look elsewhere. But that is something that Hugh and I do on a regular basis, make sure that we put Velindre first.
Can I come back on that then, Phil? Because the footprint of Velindre isn't just the sites that we've prepared. If I remember rightly, we have the farm at the north end, and we have the old tip on the eastern border of it. So it is a pretty large site. So I don't know what the battery site was, but it does appear to me that the Velindre site is a very, very large site, and excluding what we've already done, there is more land available that was, I'm assuming it's still in the joint venture. So I understand what you're saying. You're definitely right, but I think it is important that we are kept up to date on what's happening with the marketing, because this site has been vacant for, I don't know, 30 plus years, maybe 40 years now. And the only thing we haven't been promised on it is a manufacturing base. We've had Chinese investors, we've had a prison, you name it, we've had everything looked on it. And I think, we really need now to start thinking seriously about what we're going to do with it.
Yeah, we'll keep you up to speed on the marketing, absolutely. And yes, there's more land at Velindre, but it's not serviced, it's not flat, it's former tip land, it's agricultural land. So they had a specific requirement, and unfortunately Velindre didn't meet that requirement. But hopefully it does come to Wales, because it would have big spin-offs anyway for other parts of South Wales. So, but we will certainly keep you up to speed with the marketing as it progresses.
Okay, thanks for that. Paxton.
Thanks, Chairman. Just a quickie again, basically in terms of Castle Square and Wine Street, as I understand from previous meetings that we've had, Castle Square is going to cost on the order of about £9 million at the end of the day, and Wine Street about 7 million. That's 16 million in total. My understanding at the time it'll have to be funded by the council, so we're looking at another borrowing requirement, which is not insignificant. So I think that's probably the answer to the question that you were posing earlier, Jeff.
Chair, can I come in on that, please? Because that is inaccurate. I can advise Councillor Paxton Williams those figures are fanciful and largely overestimated compared to what we are currently working with as an outline budget for those schemes. So he'll need to wait until later in the year to see the actual figures, but I can absolutely categorically guarantee that what he stated today is a big overestimate for the numbers we are talking.
Well, I'm only giving you figures there, Leader, which have been reported back to this committee previously, and I've had the policy development one, and Mike White referred those figures as well.
Well, I'm correcting that now, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Be interested to see what they are at the end of the day.
Okay, we'll have to wait because we certainly don't know the figures now before the tender process. Right, Wendy Fitzgerald. Wendy?
Yes, sorry, I didn't have my hand up. It couldn't have come down from last time.
Okay, well, if you haven't got a question. Right, are there any more questions? We're going to bring this to an end now. No? Okay. Right, well, thanks very much to the officers for all the work. I'm sure you're under a lot of pressure to get these projects completed, and COVID doesn't help. Okay, right, if there's nothing else, I'll get Liz to actually draw up a letter, which we'll circulate. Any points that need to be forwarded, if you comment on the letter. Okay, we'll close the meeting now. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jeff?